Crow Country is a survival horror game that is inspired by the classics of the genre from the PlayStation 1 era. It was made by a small team of just 2 people, although the vast majority of it was actually made by just one man, and it's about to release on the Nintendo Switch. A famous film franchise told us that everyone's entitled to one good scare at Halloween. Should this be yours? Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. So starting with the story then, the game is set in 1990. You play as a police detective named Mara, who is investigating the whereabouts of one Edward Crow. He is the owner of a theme park named Crow Country, which shut down a couple of years prior in suspicious circumstances. Mara, determined to find Crow, breaks into the theme park, and so the adventure begins. Now when it comes to gameplay, as mentioned in the intro, this is heavily inspired by the survival horror games of the PlayStation 1 era, namely Resident Evil, and its first couple of sequels I would say, and also Silent Hill. It has a lot of the tropes of those games, but it does update some of these for a newer audience, which I do think is a wise choice, and we'll look at those in a moment. But you'll move Mara from screen to screen, solving puzzles, finding items, managing your inventory, and taking on a host of strange creatures. Now whilst from a first glance it looks almost exactly like the games I mentioned just now, the biggest difference is that it isn't pre-rendered backgrounds with a fixed camera perspective, as was the case in the early Resident Evil games. This has a free-form camera where you can move it with the right stick. You can move left and right, you can't move up or down, but it does allow you to fully convey your environment and see any potential threats on the horizon. It's more of a mix of some of the Silent Hill games with Resident Evil Code Veronica in terms of its camera movement, but it does move more freely than any of those games as far as memory serves. It does make searching your whereabouts that bit easier, or at least more comfortable, at the expense I would say of some of the suspense being lost in those original games where you had to deal with the perspective given to you, which did limit your vision at times and could lead to some surprise attacks. You can move around freely with the left stick, or you can opt to use the D-pad if you do want tank controls, although you can do a quick spin 180-degree turn similar to that was implemented for the Resident Evil remake on the GameCube. As much as I love old school Resi games, I did opt for the more modern controls, and that free movement was very welcomed. It's nice they've got both control schemes in there to suit either playstyle. You'll make your way about the park, needing to find keys or particular items that you'll use in conjunction with something else to unlock some sort of secret or open up the way to move further on. The puzzles are quite thought-provoking. Some of them I really did like actually. I thought they were very clever in the way they were set up. One minor gripe that I had, although it might not apply to everyone, is that there are information sheets scattered about the park, some of which give you tips on particular control schemes, but others do give you clues for the puzzles, and I did feel sometimes these went a bit too far in basically spoon feeding you the answer, something I didn't think was necessary. I like it when my clues are kept quite obscure. Now you could just say don't read these of course, but they do collect into a book in your save rooms, and being a bit of a completionist I wanted to find all of them, but this did mean sometimes reading something I wish I hadn't read. Talking of save rooms, you can save at any point. You don't need a consumable item, but these are conveyed through fire, so anything with a fire source, fireplace for example, can be used to save your game. As you make your way around the park, you'll run into a number of creatures, and whilst they aren't zombies, they do take the form of kind of the shambling, relatively slow enemies to begin with newer creatures found later up in the ante in terms of strength and dexterity. Another small gripe I had was that every enemy you encountered seemed to take the same amount of health from you, so a tiny little creature on the floor that you didn't even see would cause as much damage as something a lot bigger. There are also a few first time traps in the game that could potentially kill you in one hit if your health is low. I don't really like these in games where you have to save manually. I never think that's a good idea. It's not a good combination, but they are quite infrequent, and once you've seen them once you'll know what to look out for at least, and these are all really minor gripes. On the whole, this game is incredibly well designed. There are secrets to find too. These aren't necessary for completion, but there is an S rank to strive towards. But I really liked the pacing of the game itself and felt that you moved on in a very organic way. I would go so far as to say that this is probably the best retro modern survival horror game I've played, one that is clearly inspired by those particular games of old. I don't think I've played another one in all the years since that pulls it off quite as well as this one. Gameplay gets 18 out of 20. Controls are also very good. As I mentioned, there are those two different schemes. One thing I would have liked perhaps is to see the aiming updated a bit more than it has been. It still feels a bit clumsy at times. There are two different combat options available to you, but these equate more to just reassigning the buttons for shooting or reloading, etc., rather than actually updating the aiming. It is a small gripe though, and on the whole they also get 18 out of 20. Now, in terms of the visuals and keeping with the PlayStation 1 style, this uses a polygonal aesthetic for its character models and what looks to be a fully 3D environment, albeit it's been lit in such a way to give the appearance of pre-rendering. The character models themselves aren't to my personal taste. They look a bit more like Final Fantasy VII characters than something you would find in a survival horror game, but after about 20 seconds of playing, this quickly becomes a non-issue as you just get used to what's in front of you. The environments themselves look great. I like the use of different areas of the theme park, allowing for different themes. There's a haunted house, for example. There's a fairyland too. I do feel that the faux limitation, if you like, of creating that pre-rendered look does sometimes serve as a bit of a hindrance, mainly when things like fog come into play. They make it quite difficult to see what's in front of you. I do appreciate this is an artistic choice to build atmosphere, but I do feel that sometimes there is a fine line between what is atmospheric and what is quite obtrusive, and I do feel that sometimes this art style wanders off that line to a degree. I did love the look of the monsters though. They're quite strange, and the park itself is wonderfully designed. There are lots of different areas. I wish it was a bit bigger. I would have liked to have seen a couple more areas, but what's here does look great. By the same token, the music is also very good. Talking of atmosphere, it certainly helps to ramp this up. Whilst having that slight whimsical feel to it, you are in a theme park after all. There is no voice acting at all. Everything that you see in terms of story is done via text. Now, again, I don't know whether this was possible with such a small team, and I do appreciate that when I'm saying this, but to get that full nostalgic feeling, I would have loved to have seen some cheesy FMV cutscenes. But yeah, again, I'm not going to talk too much about what's not here, because what is here is very good. The music didn't quite have that unnerving feeling to as high a degree as I would have liked personally. It edges towards it at times, with some parts being quite eerie, but then it seems to scale it back a bit, and I would have loved to have seen it really go for it and make you feel quite uncomfortable as you play. Visuals are great though. They do really harken back to the time of the PlayStation 1, that kind of mid-90s feel. And whilst the character designs weren't to my personal tastes, I appreciate the world that's been built and think it's a very good one, and they get 17 out of 20. Audio, by the same token really, does its job very well, and it does support what you're seeing on screen. I would have liked them to have ramped it up to 11 and really increased the screen factor, but on the whole it also gets 17 out of 20. Crow Country costs £16.75 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you are getting an adventure that can be blitzed through, as was the case with those older games, but I would say on average most people will take between 6 to 8 hours to finish it on a first run. There is an S rank to aim for, as I did say earlier, and there are certain parameters that you must meet in order to achieve that. What I did like about this game though is that they aren't tied to number of saves or how long it takes you to finish. Perhaps it would have been interesting to see an S plus rank, which did take those factors into consideration, but I like the way this has been handled, and I do feel it's added some longevity to the game for some people. For most people it may be a one and done, but I do feel that what you're getting here has high production values. Major compliments to such a small team for achieving that, and you'll have a great time whilst playing it. On balance, value gets 16 out of 20. To conclude, Crow Country is a very good survival horror game in its own right, but it's also a fantastic throwback to some of the pioneers of the genre in what we now consider a true survival horror game. It takes the best parts of those and polishes them up for a new audience some 30 years later, but I also feel these additions work well even if you are a hardcore fan of what came before. There are a couple more tweaks I would have liked to have seen to really bring it up to date, but once again, as I said in the gameplay section, for me this is the best modern retro survival horror game I have ever played. There have been a lot of games that have tried to get this formula right and emulate those games of old. This one pulls it off best by quite a way, I would say. I don't think it's even close. If you're looking for something new this Halloween and you only want to get one game, I would strongly recommend this being the one. Crow Country gets a SwitchUp score of 86%. Thank you everybody for watching this review, I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, or any other game for that matter, you can get your eShop cards over at our website, switchup.gg, and doing so will get you 5% off of your purchase price. There are also links down there to PlayAsia and other places. Again, use the links, use the code stated, and you get yourself a discount from there too. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.